in your presentation, a lot of you have the maps and the various plays, whether it be the shale, tight oil, coal bed, others, in your testimony. What I'd like to know is how far behind are we from the pipeline infrastructure to move this product? I mean, the pipeline issue we're dealing with the Keystone and Keystone XL. Part of the North Dakota play is the problem is we don't have access to a pipeline, so a lot of this North Dakota oil is being inefficiently trucked down versus through pipelines. So can you all just briefly talk about pipeline infrastructure?
Thank you, Mr. Shimkus. So just to start, the infrastructure issues take time. I mean, you can often get some production going, and you get a lot of wells being drilled. Whether or not companies can then afford to build the pipeline infrastructure to move those products, oil and gas, around depends on their own view about how long the production activity will last.
If you just be a little brief, because most of the pipeline infrastructure now is based upon traditional oil and gas and refineries and the like. So all these new plays are in areas where there may not be access to. So
exactly.
I guess the point is that something we ought to consider in public policy debates? Dr. Yergin?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, it's like I said, our thinking needs to catch up with reality. Our logistics need to catch up with new production. Everything's been turned upside down. Instead of going south-north, it's going north-south. Big question, we just managed to save those refineries on the East Coast, but they have to be hooked into the North Dakota. We see, as you say, trucking. We see railroad cars. Ultimately, the most efficient way to move these supplies is by pipeline. Canada's output of oil sands is equivalent to Libya's before the revolution. There, that supply. We talk about U.S. energy independence. It's really a North American integration. So we've got to get our a pipeline system that catches up with the fact that technology's changed.
There's also some oil being barged down on the Mississippi, and there was a recent. They ran into the bridge down in the southern part of the lower Miss.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's also issues with that type of transportation. Ms. Hustler?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Yergin. We do have oil that's landlocked in North Dakota. We have buildup in our storage facilities in Cushing, and it is more efficient to move by pipeline. We're moving by rail now. I think I saw a number of 800,000 barrels a day, which is pretty substantial, and it's also safer to move it by rail by pipeline than rail.
Mr. Vitus?
I agree with the other speakers that the oil and natural gas infrastructure that's going to be needed to move this oil and gas to market is very important, and it involves a substantial investment each year and thousands of miles of pipe. The other point that I would emphasize as well is that pipelines in general tend to be the least expensive and usually the safest way to transport both gas and oil.
Thank you. And just I'll just finish.
Mr. Yergin, I've got a question for you about pipelines. Mr. Shimkus talked about it a little bit. There's an article in Energy Daily talking about how long it's taking for permitting. I'd like to introduce that article into the record, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Study found that nearly 20% of natural gas pipelines have delays of over 6 months or more. Enormous capital at risk when you think about building a new pipeline. And it's important not only for existing fields to get those pipelines. The Mississippi Shale in my district is a good example. We've got production, but relatively little demand in towns like Anthony and Coldwater, Kansas. Got to get this product to the right places. I think there's also a circular effect. I read is if you know that you can efficiently build a pipeline, folks will go look for it in other places as well. Can you talk about the interplay between challenges in building pipelines and people's willingness to take risk in finding these fields in North America?
Well, I think Ms. Hutzler spoke about that before too. I think that getting the word she used, streamlining permitting for pipelines. I mean, it's kind of pipelines are literally a pretty straightforward thing, and that we ought to that you need them to keep up with where we are, and otherwise you either are using flaring for gas or you're shipping oil by truck and so forth, and that's not a very efficient way to do it.
I appreciate that. I'm working on some legislation to give FERC a little more authority in trying to streamline this process. I think it'll be bipartisan. I think we can do this in a way that provides all the protections for the environment, all the things we need to do, but getting us to a finish line where we actually make decisions about these. Whether the pipeline's a go or a no-go, we do it in a very much more timely and reliable fashion.